The Ark of the Covenant has been a source of speculation and intrigue for well over a millennium. But what if in the Middle Ages it was discovered by a band of English Knight Templars and brought back to England? And what if, just prior to that order's suppression, they left a series of clues as to where the Ark is located? Time to decipher, here on Things Visible and Invisible. Graham, the Ark of the Covenant, as you well know, has had pretty much of a good outing in the last 40 years. It's been on films and endless books telling us that it is located in various places, mostly across Europe, though sometimes in North America as well. You've decided, or a number of years ago, you wrote a book about the Ark of the Covenant and the Templars. What's this about?
Okay, well, it's the Ark of the Covenant, like the thing that's in the Indiana Jones film, was a holy relic that the ancient Israelites had, according to the Bible, and it was hidden around about the year 600 BC, according to the Bible, and it remained lost ever since. And the Knights Templars, the Crusader Knights, in around about 1230, if I remember rightly, decided that they were going to go and look for it, and a group of them found it. Apparently, a group of Knights Templars who came from England claimed to have found it and bring it back to their what's called a preceptory, which is their kind of headquarters in England. And that was what my book was all about, looking into that. Did they find it? What happened to it after that?
So for anybody who's watching who hasn't heard of the Templars, Graham, if you could just give us a little bit of background as to who they were.
Yes, when the Crusades were going on, that's the wars between the Christians in Europe and the Arab countries in the Middle East. They fought wars that went on for centuries over who was to rule Jerusalem, because it was a holy city to the Christians and it was a holy city to Islam. So consequently, you've got these two peoples fighting each other on and off, and sometimes the fight went to the favor of the Europeans, and sometimes it went to the favor of the Arab peoples. And for what in the throughout the 1100s, it was mainly the Christian armies that held Jerusalem. And certainly for the first half of the 1100s. And during that period, various pilgrims throughout Europe wanted to visit Jerusalem, to visit the holy sites where Jesus had been killed, where he'd said to have been buried, where he's said to have risen, where all the biblical events took place. And so they called Jerusalem, the surrounding place, because it all features in the Bible, the Holy Land. And people wanted to go to the Holy Land and they paid good money to go there as pilgrims. The Knights Templars were an organization set up in Jerusalem originally to guard these people who went to the Holy Land, these pilgrims. Their idea was once they went out of European controlled areas and entered places like Syria, they needed protection. And so the Templars built a series of forts along their route to Jerusalem. And that's what they were originally, a kind of a guard, if you like. But very quickly they grew rich, and ultimately they became an actual full-time army to fight in the Holy Land for various countries in Europe. And then when there wasn't a holy war going on in the Middle East, they became mercenaries and hired themselves out in wars between various European countries. And well, they became even richer still when they decided to start lending money to people and paying and charging interest. And people also used to put their wealth into these Templar strongholds and know it would be safe there. So in a sense, the Templars became like Europe's first bankers. Anyway, they became very rich and very powerful, and ultimately, even they were not just anything to do with the Crusades. They were a kind of army for hire, bankers, you name it, based all over Europe. And they had these headquarters called preceptories, which were like military barracks, but also banks where they kept people's jewels for, and belongings and money for them. And in addition to that, these preceptories were also monasteries, because originally all Templars were warrior monks.
That's
They
right.
all took they all took vows of poverty, obedience, and chastity. That was at first. Of ultimately, although most of the rank and file Templars were warrior monks, the officers, the leaders, were knights. They were rich people. They could get married. They could make money. So the top ruling Templars were not poor knights at all. They were pretty rich, and they became obsessed with finding relics. What these were in the Middle Ages, relics were big business. Now they are the bones or belongings of saints. If you had the bones of a saint in your church, you could actually get more people coming there to worship and as pilgrims to visit, and with them bring money. So the churches or the cathedrals or abbeys that had the bones of the most important saints made the most money and became richer and richer. And it wasn't just the bones, it was belongings that were said to belong to saints. Why were they important? Because people believed that they would bring them luck, that they could cure them, that they could bring them closer to God. For many reasons, relics were big business, but the most important relics were those that were said to belong to people who were involved with in the Bible,
Yes.
something to do with the Virgin Mary or one of the disciples. And one of the most important relics of all was said to have been the Ark of the Covenant, which Moses had said that Moses had had it made on the orders of God, and it contained the Ten Commandment tablets. Now, that was kept in Jerusalem until around 600 BC. Then Jerusalem was invaded by the Babylonians from what is now Iraq, and it was smuggled out by one of the prophets, one of the high priests, smuggled it out of Jerusalem, and it was never seen again. Now, this, as far as the Knights Templar was concerned, was the relic they were really after, that and the Holy Grail. And it was this bunch from England that ultimately claimed to have found it.
Now, just on that, Graham, because although you're right, the Ark of the Covenant disappears in the pages of the Bible, but you're probably aware of what Catholics call deuterocanonical, what Anglicans and others called the Apocrypha. In the book of Maccabees, there's actually a reference to the Ark of the Covenant and the burying of the Ark of the Covenant in the hills outside Jerusalem. Was this sort of the terrain that the Templars were going to? Were they using these scriptural texts as a way of identifying perhaps the last resting place of the covenant?
Absolutely right. It's a second book of Maccabees that's still in the Catholic Bible, but not in the Protestant one. I'm not sure of the reasons they took it out, but obviously everyone was Catholic back then, and they literally said, right, we're going to try and identify where this hill is. A prophet called Jeremiah is said to have hidden it in a cave in the hillside somewhere. Now, I won't go into the whole details, but the Templars came to the conclusion that this particular place was in what is now called Petra, a place in southern Jordan. At the time, it's in the Sinai wilderness, and it's where the area where the Israelites were wandering for 40 years in the wilderness before they passed into Canaan and conquered Jericho. So that's where they went. And what's at Petra, if you go there now, it's a major tourist site. It's actually features in the Indiana Jones film, but not the one with the Ark, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where they actually find the Grail. That's in Petra. And that huge, great tomb that they go into that's cut out in the rocks, in the sandstone rocks. There's lots of those there, but they were built around about the time of the Romans. But much earlier than that, there were other tombs and caves that were used for religious purposes in that area. And it was in one of them that in fact, seemingly right next to that place that's used to film the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right next to where they find the Grail in that, there was a cave that the Templars excavated in the mid 1200s. And that's where they didn't say, we have found the Ark. They said, we have found a great treasure. Well, they had gone there claiming they were going to find the Ark. They went to a place where they thought the Ark was buried, and they came back to England saying they got a great treasure. Well, a lot of people decided that they must have found the Ark.
The location is fascinating, just the other side of the Jordan. Was that near Qumran and the Essenes and what was later where the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered? Is that sort of area?
It looks very similar, but the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Qumran area, that's about 200 or 300 miles north of what I'm talking about.
Okay, so the Templars go and they discover something just on the other side of the Jordan, and do we have any sort of historical record of them traveling back to England with guarding this treasure? Is there any sort of hints along the way that something was afoot with the Templars and the Ark of the Covenant?
Yes, the people who actually claim to have found this treasure and seem to be looking for the Ark were a specific group of Templars from a place called Temple Hardwick. It's named after them, the temple in it, which is in Warwickshire, not far from Stratford upon Avon, where William Shakespeare comes from, in the centre of England. Mm-hmm. And they had a preceptory there, this half barracks, half bank, with a bit of monastery tied on the end. And that's where they kept various relics that they had possessed. They claimed to have had bones of various saints and things that have belonged to various holy men and women and things like this. And they claim to have had a merchant that actually saw all of this in the 1270 thereabouts. He said that he saw a huge golden chest. Now, before he had a good look at it, they dragged him out. He was depositing stuff in their bank, and he happened to go past this reliquary, as it's called, where they kept the relics, and caught a glimpse of this huge golden chest. And from what he describes, he said he saw that there seemed to be the wings of an angel carved on top of it. Well, the Ark of the Covenant is said to have been a huge golden chest with two golden angels carved on top of it. So it does sound as if, even if it wasn't the Ark, it was something they certainly believed was the Ark. Now, one person who took this very seriously, who thought that the Knights Templar did have this, was none other than the explorer Sir Walter Raleigh in the late 1500s. He actually bought the area that used to belong to the Templars and had the whole place excavated to see if he could find the Ark. He didn't. He didn't find anything, as far as I know. But the really interesting thing, and what had interested Walter Raleigh and other treasure hunters over the years, is that the Knights Templars are finally outlawed by the Pope in 1307. Well, no, the Pope outlawed them a few years later, but they were arrested in France, for example, in 1307 and burnt at the stake for heresy. The real reason is that the King of France owed a lot of money to the Templars. He wanted them out the way. The Pope thought, hold on a minute, I owe him a load of money too. I'm going to get them out the way. And a few years later, he outlawed them throughout Christendom, and most Templars just sort of like... They weren't all killed, that the whole order dissolved. And it was always strange that many of these Templars, their wealth that they had was never discovered. Now, this was very true of the group that came from Warwickshire. And they actually, the ones in England, managed to survive longer than the ones elsewhere in Europe, because the English kings, the succession of three Edwards, didn't like the Pope at all interfering with what they did, and they actually allowed the Templars to continue in England, and they carried on. The ones in Warwickshire, one of the last Templar groups going, and they ultimately died during the Black Death in around 1350s, in the 1350s. And when they knew that the end was coming, because people knew that village by village, the Black Death was spreading. It was being carried by rats, and often the rats were fleas that were carrying this. I think wiping out about 2 out of every 3 people, in some cases entire villages, because everyone was related in villages. They all probably had the same susceptibility to disease, and people who were immune were probably all in one area because they were all related to each other. So the Templars knew the plague was coming, and they were all going to be wiped out in their village where they were. And what they did is they claimed that they'd hidden their relics, which included this ark, and left clues for those in the future to find it. And that was what became really fascinating.
Well, let's just pause there, Graham, because you've built that up wonderfully. And we will return to this when we meet again. But for now, tell people, Graham, where they can pick up a copy of the Templars and the Ark of the Covenant.
Well, the Templars and the Ark of the Covenant can be got on Amazon, or look at my website, grahamphillips.net.
For now, Graham, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.